Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this voquzlabs presentation. My name is Rogan Morrison. I'm a director with voquzlabs, and with me in our webinar today we have my colleague Andreas Knaub from Cebus. And today we're going to be discussing some of the aspects around SAP GRC access authorizations and how does it impact what's happening this year as well as beyond this year. What do we see happening in that space? How do you as an organization change, adapt, make the necessary plans to move forward in this specific space? So we're happy to have you on the webinar this morning. Just some housekeeping elements for today. This webinar is recorded, and the slides and the webinar will be, from a video perspective, will be made available at the end of this presentation. You will receive a link to it. You will also see that we will have some space for questions, and we invite you to ask questions in the question tab and open that, and we're interested to hear back from you. This is we try to make this as interactive as possible. We also will be running some polls during the course of the webinar. Just want to understand what you guys are thinking about, where you're at, some of the context that we'll discuss. We'll ask some questions in a poll and try and make it as interactive as possible, and try and get this process on the way as quickly as possible. So let's get this, let me clear this out the way. Right, good. So just a little bit about the agenda today. We're going to look at some company information. I really wanted to focus on some of the aspects around GRC principles, and these are really important when we think about not losing focus on the current status of where governance, risk, and compliance is going in this SAP environment, but also to keep that at the forefront of our minds when it comes to where we're looking for into the future too. So, and then what is changing, look at the new changes that are taking place. I'm sure some of you have been available and making use of the sessions that SAP Sapphire has been having recently over the last week or so. Some industry changes, some cybersecurity concerns. We'll talk a little bit about those, and then adapting to this change. What do we see going forward from an authorization and access perspective? How do you solve some of the key challenges, and what are we doing in this space that is different to other organizations, and how are we improving on an ongoing basis? And then some questions. So just a bit about voquzlabs. For those of you who haven't joined us in previous webinars, and even if you have, just bear with us. We're pretty much a leader in the SAP license authorizations and compliance management add-on space. We really combine a number of best-in-class SAP user management solutions with very strong consulting expertise to help organizations solve challenges in their licensing, authorizations, and compliance areas in the SAP space specifically. We do have partner companies that help us in broader spaces, in other solutions and that, but really we focus on SAP, and that's our key area. As an organization, we started in 1980, so have been going for more than 40 years. We launched SAMQ in 2010, and this is our flagship product in terms of SAP licensing and the optimization of your licensing. In 2018, we joined forces and added the SATQ solution to this, because there is such a close collaboration between licensing and authorizations and compliance. You can't really divorce the two. And our SATQ solution, we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what we're doing going forward into the future and how we see this evolving beyond 2021. We have organizations, and we are globally based right across the world. So whichever region you're in, please feel free to reach out to us. We will just a quick click away. As I said, we're based globally. We deal with lots of different industries and solutions, etc. And we have many different people. I'm working out of the South African office, and I have colleagues in our other offices around the world. As I said, we have two main solutions, and we have advisory elements around those. Just I won't cover too much on the right-hand side of this screen, but in essence, we have a license management solution, SAMQ. It covers all the named user license optimization, indirect and digital access, which is really a key focus for many organizations at the moment. Authorization and usage-based licensing, helping you to understand engine measurements and creating alerts for these. Also, again, interacting with S4hana license migrations is key. Doing compliance for your license usage is really what we do in this space on the license management side, and we have a lot of advisory areas underneath that help you to gain the best benefit from the SAMQ solution tool. Aligned to that, we brought in SETQ, and SETQ is linked to SAMQ. It's a really important factor that you can align both your authorizations, identities, and the management of those to the license management. And building a bridge between the two is what makes us unique, because when you have a business scenario where your end users are changing their authorizations, either via a movement change, etc., then you want to be able to understand whether or not there's going to be a license impact, and you want to be able to manage that license impact. And that's how SETQ fits in with SAMQ. But specifically today, we're going to look at some of the SETQ and the authorization elements. And really what our SETQ solution covers is all of those elements around authorizations and role concept designs. These are fundamental, and they're changing, and that's really what we're looking at today. Web-based requests and approvals, creating a simple, easy-to-use graphical user interface is really what customers want today, and we're improving on that on a regular basis. Your compliance, such an important area. We'll touch on a little bit of things in terms of the changes in compliance that we see that have happened over the last few years, and I'm sure things are changing. We'll talk about some of the elements that are changing into the future. One of the most important aspects that we see for many customers is this role optimization. We're going to talk about a little bit about that. We have had some webinar sessions where we've discussed this in detail, but really we see that for many organizations, this is a key element that they need to start focusing on in the future is role reduction, reducing the amount of roles that they have. Their business models are changing, and we really feel that this is something that organizations can really gain a quick set of value from reducing the amount of effort that they have to apply to managing their roles within their organizations. And then doing automatic compliances and audit documentation. We'll talk about some automation and the changes that are taking place from an automation perspective, how these are being changed in our organization, etc. Password manager is quite simple and straight. And then we have some advisory products and solutions that we have in terms of services there. So helping organizations understand first of all, their authorization concept, and then redesigning that to make sense for what their changes are taking place from their architectural level and the new software applications that they're taking on from SAP, etc. Compliance reporting, helping companies understand their IT audits. Security, we have a security check. This is really important given the amount of security breaches that are taking place, and we'll talk a little bit about those. And then S4hana Raw Migration. So there is a massive drive from SAP with RISE for SAP to drive organizations towards the S4hana space, and that can be both on-prem and in cloud. And therefore, it's really important to understand that over the next few months and years that this is going to be a key focus. There's been so many webinars that have been taking place in the Sapphire space that have RISE included in this, and we see that the S4hana Raw Migration can really play a significant part in helping you transition, not only just now, but into the future, and that's really critical. But before we get on to that, let's just come back to a few GRC principles, and I think this is really important because you need to have a solid grounding of the principles before you can actually take the next steps in terms of defining the future. So governance, I've just taken a few slides here just to outline these again. What is governance? I don't want to spend a lot of time on these, but it's really critical that organizations understand that there is accountability that you need to have, and this accountability sits with your stakeholders. They require leadership and, most importantly, transparency. So that's critical. We need to build this into the way in which we manage the authorization principles across the SAP landscape, that there needs to be transparency of who's doing what, and that people are taking accountability. And what we're seeing from an accountability perspective is that many organizations are moving from being a very IT-centric accountability to more a business-centric accountability when it comes to management of authorizations, of their end users. They want the business unit owners, whether they're in finance, in procurement, in whichever department they're in, to take more of that accountability. So when we look at the solution set that we're building for this, this is really key for the future, is that can your solution set manage that level of accountability? Actions, of course, you need to take actions. Risk mitigation is a key area. We want to be able to identify the specific areas of risk that require decision making and provide that transparency to the relevant people. So are your management be able to take the actions necessary to achieve the objectives that you have as an organization? And then providing assurance. So this is again such a key area. We'll talk a little bit about it in terms of the internal audit function and what's changing in that space, and the necessary adaptations and adoptions that you need to take to make this more rigorous and more foolproof. So assurance, giving assurance to third parties, giving assurance of your security to your customers, to the people that are engaging with you, that their information is secure, is critical. That's part of the governance elements. Risk management, the enterprise risk management factor really becomes very important. It combines the corporation's business strategy and their goals, and it really is the distinction between those two in where business is actually meeting in the context of those two. So we want business to meet its objectives, and therefore you have to manage risk. And really what risk management is a set of methods aimed at preventing such types of suboptimal performance from occurring. And really that's the whole principle of risk management. Also extends into your SAP access and authorization solutions. So you need to have a very key identification of where risk is, so you can manage the critical risks in your company, prioritize them, understand what those are, and then develop the rest necessary procedures. So risk mitigation is critical, and it will not go away. Why? Because the more you and the better you manage risk into the future, the more you're going to be able to improve the value of your assets. And that's pretty much what I put at the bottom there. So risk management really accounts for why large enterprise value data, and your data in SAP is critical. There's so much valuable data in SAP from your business processes, from all the financial management elements that you present and represent if you're a large global organization, to stock markets, to shareholders, to stakeholders, etc. All of this information, a lot of it is sitting in your SAP landscape, and you need to manage the risk around that. And what we see from a modernization perspective is the elements of AI and cloud computing are really driving this. So there's a significant, substantial stream of information being pushed through and having to be managed from a risk perspective. What is our goal of risk management? Of course, we want to reduce risk. This is critical. So there are various steps in this process, and these are not necessarily in line from a step perspective, but if you look at from a tooling perspective and where things are going towards, we need to cover these areas when you want to reduce risk. And this is critical. So your solution from an access and authorization perspective must manage the majority of these elements, in completeness. You must be able to manage the risk and identification and the evaluation of that risk. Where is it coming from? You need to manage the threat prevention and remediation of threats. So managing the security aspect, efficient usage of resources, very key to reducing this. We spoke about role reduction, optimization of users, improving the quality of your internal communications, being able to have workflows, itemization that helps you to improve the quality of this communication is key when you want to improve value and reduce the risk. Having continuous improvement, we'll talk a little bit about this in some later slides. How are we at voquzlabs doing continuous improvement, and what are we going to show this year in terms of the improvements that we're making in the SETQ solution, and how will this benefit you going forward? And that really inspires the confidence of your stakeholders. So you have specific stakeholders in your organization that you need to touch base with and have confidence. They need to have confidence in what you're doing in terms of risk management, and you need to have those pieces in place. And lastly, compliance. Again, from one of the key principles, compliance is made up of legal and various different regulations, and it's vital to keep pace with these ever-changing regulations, be they both external and or government or internal. And here are just a few. I'm not going to go into every single one of them. You can look them up, but I'm sure most of you are very familiar with these. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, the SOC, GDPR, your PCI, which is your payment card industry, and ISO 27000. There are constant changes that are taking place. I'm not going to list all of these because there's ongoing lists and lists of changes that are taking place. So again, looking forward into the future, just be aware you need to manage ongoing governance, ongoing risk, and ongoing compliance, and you need to build these principles into the business relationships that you have from a SAP perspective. So why do I say that that is so important? Because if you have a good fundamental of the principles, you can then apply to that which is changing. And it's exciting to see what's happening in the SAP space. Was attending the keynote address earlier last week, at the end of last week with SAP on the Sapphire, and I just taken 3 key elements out of what was provided in that keynote address by Christian Klein and by Hasso Plattner and the rest of the individuals from SAP. And the 3 things that are coming out of this, and the question really is around how do these impact your access and authorization. So let's talk a little bit about that. Well, SAP Business Networks, members of a new SAP Business Network will be able to gain, single unified portal to gain a holistic view into their entire chain of ecosystems, logistics, traceability, equipment management, and maintenance. What does this mean from a security, access, and authorization perspective? It just means that there's going to be a much greater surface area. Some things are going to change holistically in the business network space, which opens up the possibility for additional risk. That's exactly why I mentioned those 3 principles earlier of governance, risk, and compliance. You need to look at these with a set of glasses on that say, what could be the potential risks? What set of governance do I need to implement? And what set of compliance may change with relationship to each of these new changes that are taking place? So they introduce new sustainability specific products. Is there new regulations in the sustainability products that I need to take consideration with from an access and authorization perspective? Who needs to gain these if I add these new products into my SAP landscape? And this is really the questions that we should be asking out there. And then again, SAP's industry cloud. This is a real driver that SAP has. They're really pushing the cloud elements and moving customers off an on-premise solution. And we'll talk a little bit about how cloud is impacting the future and what we're doing to make that as easy as possible for you as organizations to gain the next foot up on that. So, okay. What also is changing, industry frameworks. The 3 lines defense model, I'm using this as an example, changed. It was originally proposed and adopted in 2013, and this is the Institute of Internal Auditors. So your internal audit frameworks are changing, and this is something you need to be aware of. It changed at the end of last year, 2020. We're only just seeing some of those changes taking place. So what is the fundamental change that's taking place in this context? And I'm sure this is something that you need to discuss with your internal auditors. So talking at it from a strategic level, I would certainly would understand if I was in your business, what is your internal auditors' new changes that they're going to bring out this year, and how will that impact the way in which you manage your SAP authorizations and compliance? So that's a critical element. What we see changing in the IAA's 3 lines model is that there's far greater interaction from a management perspective over here on the right-hand side to the actual internal audit perspective. So in the past, it was only a one-way piece of information or communication and coordination. Now it's a much more 2-way alignment and communication and coordination and collaboration that needs to take place between the management of the organization and the internal audit. So that's a fundamental change that's taking place. And that applies now into SAP. So think about your internal auditors coming and auditing you and checking up on you. That management interaction needs to be far more rigorous. And that's a really important aspect that's changing into the future. So I'm sure this is going to get rolled out on a regular basis if it hasn't already this year. And you'll need to provide for that in your solution set for SAP. Okay, if I can get my slide to move down. Let me just move it on one. Okay, and then the third element that we see that is really growing, and it should be a no surprise to everybody out there, is security concerns, and there's a number of security breaches. So this was a survey done by ERPM in 2018, so a little bit older. We're 3 years on from that, but I think this is still very relevant in the context of what's happening into the future. Just recently, I'm sure you've seen the number of security breaches and ransomware attacks that are happening with Colonial Pipeline, with the Irish Health Service. They're not limited to a specific industry, JDA Meets. So these are organizations that are working in the IT environment, and their security breaches are taking place on a much higher basis. So if we look at the concern shown by IT executives and IT management, etc., around security and the number of security breaches, then you can see that for the IT and SAP security, it's sitting at 80%. Of course, this is very valuable information to us. Why? Because it then helps us to focus our attention on where we should be, positioning tool sets to manage these breaches. IT management, non-security, 49%, IT analysts, 56%, and then as you go down the chain, it seems that the executive management don't see it as significantly, but I'm sure that has grown. But certainly as a security individual or an IT specialist, your security is paramount. And what we're seeing here is that, in fact, 70% of cyber attacks are carried out by internal people within your organization. And this is where we really wanted to show an additional focus to say, what can you change for the future? If 75% are taking place from internally, this is really the focus area, and you want to reduce this as much as possible in terms of the risk that is taking place here. So that's a critical space that we talk about, and we wanted to show a few things on that side as well. So how do we adapt to this change and the changes that we've just spoken about? I think it's important that we look at some of the adaptations. So first of all, new products, new solutions, new infrastructure, cloud approach. I mean, this is exactly what SAP is driving, is this entire new set of products. And we've seen it in the Sapphire 2021 keynote address and in the other addresses from other organizations as part of Sapphire. But this means that you have a greater surface area for cyber actors to target. And you need to be aware of that. That's certainly coming down the line. The bigger and the more infrastructure and solutions you add into your IT landscape, the bigger the surface area is that you can get attacked on, and you need to start managing that. Okay. What I also noticed and noted in the keynote addresses and some of the other Sapphire content is that for most organizations, there's this massive drive to address the business requirements first, and it's not a bad thing, but the priority on governance, risk, and compliance is sometimes left right to the end. Okay, and that creates a lot of change. And what we're trying to do in our space from a voquzlabs perspective is try to get that built in. And again, that's why I mentioned the principles. Key to the organization is to put principles in place that help you as an organization to address your GRC in the first instance and get that right. So what I saw in the keynote addresses from the Sapphire is that at no point in time did they say, oh, and be aware that these changes that will take place will have an impact on security. Take a look into the security. We're going to improve security. We're going to be looking at that. There was no mention of that. And that kind of, again, stirred up a sense that we sometimes miss that out. And It can still remain in some organizations that these processes are very manual. They use some antiquated tool sets, and you really need a new set of GRC solutions that can solve these new problems that are coming out from the new solutions. Okay, threats. SAP organizations are certainly not immune. There are a lot of threats that are taking place, and even though there's a range of GRC tools available out there, for many organizations, they see the high cost and tool complexity as an inhibitor to adopting these tools, and they stay on manual. So we wanted to provide you with an opportunity to start engaging and looking at how can you reduce threats by doing a security check or security assessments. And these things are quick and easy to do. We help organizations to understand what their security is. You don't have to implement a tool set to start with this. So this is something where we can provide organizations with an option and an adoption process that is quick and simple to help them understand the threat of security to them. Right, let me click on that next there. Okay, maybe I can pass over to Andreas for a little bit, just to talk a bit about the SETQ solution in context, and how some of these modules, how we are using these modules to address the latest trends that I've just actually been discussing.
Yes, Rogan, thank you very much, and hello from my side. Yes, you mentioned before in your slides that there's some roles as an issue. We have role reduction, we have compliance issues, we have security issues, and last not least, the new cloud stuff which is coming up, not only with SAP, also with other companies providing cloud services. When we talk about the roles, then we have on the left-hand side the role reference manager and of course the role manager, where we provide predefined roles, so kind of template roles for you for the old ECC and also for S4 if you like. And so it's pretty easy to create new roles out of this template. You don't have to make those department interviews and everything like that. But this pretty much belongs to a kind of new role creation. But some customers also say, we have a good process, everything is fine, but the roles are whatever, dinosaur roles or monster roles or stuff like that's grown over the years. And for this case, we have the reduction manager, which is a spin-off of our artificial intelligence development, which is coming up this year. And the reduction manager is capable to shrink roles. One side is user assignments. Let's say you have 10 roles assigned to a user, but he only needs one. So the reduction manager can reduce the remaining 9 roles and only keep those 1 role for the user. And the new functionality is it can shrink the roles. Let's say you have 20,000 transactions code. Sometimes this is happening, and you only need 50 or so inside the roles. Then it can shrink it. It can shrink from composite single roles, from composite roles and everything. And it's pretty fast and easy to do. So this is a kind of service we provide for our customers to get a quick win with shrink roles. Not being it's not necessary to have a big project here to work on your roles. Nevertheless, it's possible to integrate compliance. So you can have, if you have the role reference manager for the new roles, the roles are compliance ready. There's no SOD conflict or stuff like that. But of course, when you shrink your roles, there can be conflicts. So you can use the compliance manager for that, for role manager, reference, and also for the reduction manager. And some companies don't know what conflicts can be, or SOD conflicts, we also have the compliance reference model here. So we have around about 500 templates here, which telling you what can be a SOD conflict or stuff like that. So it's possible to work on everything, pretty much automated, especially with the reduction manager, and also the compliance manager is telling you what to do and how to solve a conflict and stuff like that, which makes it pretty comprehensive. On the right-hand side, we have here the alert manager. This is also an important tool for for the tracking of what the users are doing. Let's say somebody has done a download, you don't want to do that or want to see that, or somebody started whatever SE16N. The responsible person gets an email, so you have the pretty easy and clear overview what's happening inside your SAP system. The Cloud Connector on the lower point here of the deck is a kind of workbench. Let's say you have a tool which nobody knows or a solution inside the cloud. The Cloud Connector is also capable to connect it. Of course, it was developed to connect to SAP products like SuccessFactors, Ariba, stuff like that. But during the development, it was showing that customers also needed to connect to other products like Salesforce. And this workbench can also connect to exotic solution if you want. You only have to have an good API, which is the post and get functionality, stuff like that. And then you can connect to all of the cloud solutions in the world. And let's say you are the HR manager for inside a company, you're joining and you get the role HR manager, then the Cloud Connector will directly connect you to the SuccessFactors, and you have all the user rights then in SuccessFactors too. So pretty good connection, and this opens the world into the new generation, what is beyond 21. So we have more and more cloud solutions, and the Cloud Connector is the gate to those solutions.
Great, thanks, Andreas. What we want to do is just ask a quick poll. We spoke about Cloud Connector and the importance of Cloud Connector. We just like to get some feedback from you as an audience. What do you see in relation to cloud? Do you think so I'm going to launch a poll at the moment, and maybe it just gives us some indication as to where organizations are at with regard to their cloud solution, and does it cover all the relevant aspects from a cloud authorizations and access perspective. So let's launch that. We're distributing the poll at the moment, and you should be able to vote on the screen at the moment. Okay, responses are coming in. So we'll give you a little while, and then we'll actually talk about the response. Okay, we've got close to 70% of the vote in. Let's give it another 10-15 seconds just to get the last people to give their input. It gives us good feedback to understand how organizations are currently managing this specific aspect and how they see it from a future-looking perspective. Okay, so let's close the poll. Well, I'll give it another 5-10 seconds there. See, people are still voting. So, but we've got 85% of the poll there. Okay, let's share this with everybody. Okay, so you should see the poll results here. What's interesting to see is that 40% of the people on the attendance webinar today say that 40% have within the SAP solution, it's covering cloud aspects, and it can help with the Security Act. That's good. We have 32% that say no. It would be interesting to find out the answer no. Is it because you don't necessarily have a cloud solution in place, or your business hasn't adopted cloud? Is it that the solution that you have doesn't have the functionality to do that? Again, here, what we're seeing from the future, and we're going to mention it, is that cloud is a really big driver at SAP at the moment. So if you're saying no and you don't have a solution, we can help you with that. Some people say don't know. They don't know if they have if their solution can actually do that. Again, once you found that out, it may be very valuable for you to understand how we can manage the cloud and how all of the various different cloud solutions can fit in to our SETQ solution to manage authorizations in a single and very simple way. So that's some good results there. Good. Thank you for doing that poll. It gives us some insight into where the rest of the organizations are out there. We're going to hide this for the moment and carry on with some of the things going into the future now. So what we're seeing from a voquzlabs perspective is that we're trying to prepare as much for the future as possible as well. So part of the research and development work that we're doing started off from a manual perspective. We saw how organizations use manual process to manage their GRC solution. They then went into having some tool sets, but we're now moving, and that's really what we're showing here, is that we're moving to AI, artificial intelligence. I've got a slide on that coming up shortly. So one of the things that we're doing in this space is to bring in a artificial automation robot to help manage authorizations. That's absolutely new. Nobody else is doing it. We'll be launching it later this year. It's part of the roadmap for the SETQ solution. And on top of that, we're also very highly focused on managing everything that's happening in the cloud space. So that's why we put that poll up there, because we see that cloud is going to increase the surface area. It's going to create some new challenges for you as an organization, and you need to be able to manage all of that in one single authorization concept. That's the whole principle of what we're trying to aim for in this context. So let's move on to what we do as well. Andreas, you spoke about role reduction manager. We have had a session on this, but maybe we should come back and just touch on this and the importance of this for the future, and why is it important for organizations who've had SAP for a long period of time and maybe moving to S4hana, maybe moving into cloud solutions, etc. Why is role reduction so important for businesses, and how can it help them?
Yeah, like mentioned before, we have over the years companies develop overgrown roles, or the dinosaur monster roles, stuff like that. Don't have too many assignments of roles to users, and therefore we have the reduction manager here, and it's an easy way to reduce that stuff. So on the left hand side you see the overgrown users or overgrown roles, and what we are doing here, we are tracing the user activity and see what they really need or what they really want. And here we have the spin-off from the artificial intelligence development, which is one part of the new reduction manager. And there's a big amount of math behind. I cannot explain here because, to be honest, I really don't understand that. It's a lot of math and a lot of calculation, and therefore we have a new technology here. The whole stuff you have seen in the picture before is running on ABAP, on some SAP system, but the calculation to reduce the roads is so heavy that we have a new technology here where we use the Linux Docker container to make the calculation and then give it back to the ABAP. What we can do here, we have, together with the identity and role manager, we have an automated process. At the end of the day, we have lean users or lean roles, which everybody wants or desires. And if you like, you can also make the compliance check afterwards, after the lean roles. And if something if you find something to correct, then you can do it inside the compliance manager. You can make the mitigation. Of course, we have other modules here where we could show like mitigation manager, stuff like that. This is an easy example how to get a quick win to have small and good roles out of the old role set, and without the necessity to create new roles.
Great, thanks for that, Andreas. I think this is, again, from a business perspective, if you're moving to S4hana, if you're moving to new cloud solutions and you have an existing legacy system, whether it be an HCM system, and you're moving to SuccessFactors, again, this is an opportunity for you into the future to plan a cleaner move. And that's really what we're suggesting here in terms of access and authorization into the future. Make it cleaner at the start. Start with a cleaner approach. It makes your migration, your implementation much smoother, much easier. And that's why we've introduced the reduction manager, is to help organizations take this existing raw concept that they've developed over many years and bring it to a state of optimization. That's part of the continuous business improvement that reduces risk. I spoke about it earlier in terms of the principles. So tying this back to good governance, risk, and compliance is making reductions, improving efficiencies. This also mitigates risk because the volume and security, because the volume of roles that you have in your organization, the more you have, it actually creates, again, a greater surface area for things to go wrong, and you want to reduce that as much as possible. Okay, great. And then I think what's really exciting for us this year is that we are developing a artificial intelligence robot structure for authorizations. We'll be releasing this, and this is just a very high-level overview of this AI authorizations robot. We will definitely do a session on this later in the year, so look out for this. We'll have some of the key people who've built it explain to you how this works, etc. But at a very high level, this authorization robot and the AI is already pre-built sets of authorization context that will be provided to you. It sits outside of the SetQ solution. You can see the SetQ solution here. It does an ERP export from a composite role and from a single role, so it automatically, based on certain algorithmic information, automatically processes the authorizations for you and then feeds them directly into your SetQ solution. So there's a constant improvement flow here. You can see it goes from SetQ into the ERP. It creates data, and here we have optimization models and authorization models, and this actually flows through and back into SetQ. So it's a really key concept that we're trying to build that will speed up the management of authorizations, and we'll be doing some prototyping of this during the course of this year, which is really exciting. Okay, and as I said earlier, cloud. Our SetQ solution is really focused this year in terms of 2021 on covering your cloud functionality, and we want to make sure that any customers who are moving to the cloud know that there is a solution available to cover them from a cloud perspective if you don't already have one. So what I'd like to do is just launch another poll quickly and just get an understanding about some of the potential risks that you have from a mitigation of third-party and internal people. So let's launch that and put it out there. We're just distributing it at the moment. And while that's being distributed, again, there are some questions that are coming up. I see some people have put some questions in there. We will have a session time for questions. But if you ever need any more information about and some detailed analyses on or demo on how our SetQ solution covers this, please feel free to reach out to us, touch base with us. We can help you with understanding how this works in greater detail. Okay, let's give it another 10-15 seconds. We've already got 65% of the votes. Okay, and what's good to see, and this is really reaffirming, I'm going to close the poll now and just talk about the results of this. Okay, what's really good to see is that most organizations do have within their SAP Access and Authorization solution a mechanism to manage and control the risks posed by their employees and third-party contractors and actors. I think this is really critical. For those who say no, I certainly think this is something that we can help you with and get you to understand. Some say they're not sure. One of the key areas that we have, as I said earlier, is a compliance check. It's one of our services that we provide from an advisory perspective. So if you're interested to understand what is your current risk related to third-party people accessing your system, internal people, where are your highest risk levels of compliance? How can you mitigate these? We can certainly help you with this in the space. Good. Thank you very much for filling out that poll. Good. We're going to have some time for questions. So let's get those questions up. I just want to grab the question check bar here quickly. Let's see if I can bring this out and make it a bit bigger so I can just see the questions here. Okay, so we have a question here. Does the role reduction functionality work on derived role concept and a composite role concept? Maybe I can give that to you,
Yes.
Andres.
Yes, it works. You can shrink whatever you want, and you can also shrink new roles if you like. Let's say if you have a new S4hana system running and you get the big roles from your integrator, you can also shrink them. And of course, you can shrink signal roles, composite roles, mother roles, whatever you want.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andreas. So I hope that answers your question there. Yeah, I think it's more of a comment here. It does sound great in a greenfield environment, but in brownfield or bluefield, it is more of a challenge to keep the core clean. Yes, certainly to keep the core clean is really important. Totally agree with your comment there, Paul. Yeah, maintenance is a very critical aspect of SAP authorizations and compliance. And what we try to achieve in terms of from a modular perspective is having things like an ongoing online audit, which makes sure that people don't change the or mitigate immediately the potential risk before they start doing things, and that keeps your core much cleaner. Yes, we are recording the webinar. There's a question regarding the version of SuccessFactors that can be connected to. Andreas, I don't think from a version perspective we have any issues with regards to one specific version over another. It's totally
it's a workbench. So it's a workbench. So if you're not clear, if a version is running, we have a service called Cloud Readiness Workshop, where we check for, I think it's around about 1,500 euros, if the cloud solution will work with your system together with the SetQ. And of course, we have customers beginning with Ariba, SuccessFactors, stuff like that. But we also have, I think one is now Salesforce, CRM, stuff like that. But nevertheless, we should check in your environment and a customer's environment if the cloud connection will be stable and running and everything will do. So I would recommend to do the readiness workshop for each cloud product you have.
Okay, great. And then there's a question, does the enabler role help to reduce roles? We have two modules that manage roles in a different way. One is the extension manager and one is the reduction manager. We've spoken quite significantly about the reduction manager, but maybe, Andreas, I can just, we can give people just an understanding of what the extension manager does. And this is also something that most companies have for the future.
It's doing the opposite. The reduction manager is reducing roles, and the extension manager is using the same traces to assign roles to users. Let's say you have created a new role set from our reference model or by hand with the classic PSCG stuff like that, and you're not sure if the roles are complete. Some people coming to the office in the morning, starting SAP, oh, you have no rights. Yeah? You're calling support, I cannot work. You want to prevent that. The extension manager can also help you here because it can offer you to run the old and the new role set in parallel. So at the end of the day, the extension manager, will tell you, okay, assign to Rogan whatever role that he can work. And let's say after 3 months or so, you can remove the old role set and nobody would have acknowledged that something changed because there was no interruption in the working. So the extension manager is giving you new roles and giving the chance to have a smooth migration when going to new roles.
Okay, great. Thanks, Andreas. Right, I think that wraps up all the questions that we have for today's webinar. If there are any other questions, or if you'd like to get in touch with us, please feel free to do that. From our side, we'd like to close out the webinar. We've got a few minutes left, but we also just want to say that we do have other webinars that are coming up. So just be aware of these. We'll be discussing later in this month. We will be having an expert panel discussing SAP license management. We've got quite a number of interesting people that are going to be on that panel, and we really want to take this opportunity to invite you to come, bring your questions. Let's discuss some of the most key critical challenges that are happening in the license management space. And then we're going to be looking also at the authorization concept, how a software supported authorization concept can help you with the generation, distribution, and updating of your authorizations in a simple and smart way. So we'll be looking at how SETQ does this, maybe do a bit of a deeper dive in terms of a demonstration of the SETQ solution and functionality, and then we can show you a little bit about the actual product itself. We've done quite a lot of work this year in terms of building up some information around SETQ, and for those of you who don't have a solution, again, we would welcome you to get in touch with us for any of our services, as we've mentioned earlier, or for a demonstration of our SETQ solution. Okay, we do have another question here. I just want to see it coming through here. I just want to read it here quickly. Is a composite role still necessary after using GRC? Because we know that there is a business role that will store the roles. Maybe Andreas, can you see the question there, and you maybe want to comment on that?
I cannot see the question. 1 second, I try.
Okay.
No, it's empty for me.
Okay, let me just read it quickly.
Okay.
Hi, my company has applied GRC in a company, and I'm used to maintaining it, but till now I'm wondering, is a composite role still necessary after using GRC? Because we know there is a business role that will store the roles. What's your perspective on this?
Good question. To be honest, I would forward this to a consultant to answer it.
Okay.
Maybe we can answer after the show.
Sure, no problem. We'll get back to you on that question. But from our side, thank you very much for attending today. We appreciate your time, and we wish you a very successful rest of your day. Stay healthy, and yes, thank you so much for your time today.